how did that intergenerational interview process work? Well, we were interested in first of all, recruiting kids who might not otherwise have an opportunity to have these sorts of conversations, and who could expand who was included in people's field of vision as a we. Meaning, I wanted adults in the city to meet these kids who were being spoken of as a lost generation and say, wow, we need to do more. There's nothing about these kids that are lost. We need to figure out how to do a better job ourselves. So we recruited kids who were in programs for youth at risk, principally through the Chicago area project and also some community-based organizations. And we recruited about 50 young people. And they ranged, the youngest was, I think, 12 years old. The oldest was about 21. And they were mostly, not all, but mostly kids at risk, many of whom lived in public housing. And then the glue people, as I said, was about 200 names of people all over the city in all walks of life. And kids were given a choice of whom they wanted to interview. They just had a brief description of where they sat. But, people might say, I think that person is in a cool job or lives in my neighborhood or whatever. So they could pick. And the way the interview would be set up is the kids were given pretty, I'd say, rudimentary training in appreciative inquiry, mainly to get comfortable with the questions they were going to be asking and the process. And they were accompanied to the interview by a member of the design team. So the design team person's responsibility was to take notes on the interview, and the young person's responsibility was to really engage the interviewee in the conversation so that it was a very lively conversation. And at the end of the interview, actually one of the really touching things that happened was that the 8th question in the interview, which was intended to be a kind of reflective and sort of summary of the interview, was after talking about lots of things that the young person would say, as you look back over this interview, what image really stands out for you as representing your hope for the city's future? Because they had talked about a lot of different things. What happened, which we didn't anticipate, was that over and over and over again, the person being interviewed would look at the young person and say, you. And it chokes me up to this day because I saw it so many times. And, of course, for the young person, talking to these moral giants, that was a huge thing, a life-changing thing for some of them. But also, it became clear out of that there was a tremendously strong shared sense of identity that emerged out of those interviews. And that each side really gained perspective. In the case of the established leaders, they really gained a new sense of energy about the fact that there was a young generation coming up strong that were really interested in these civic issues. And for the young people to be included and to feel their own sense of power and agency as change agents just by being equipped with questions was also really important, because so many of them were used to being treated like problems to be solved or criminals in the making just by virtue of their age and color of their skin. And so that was a very empowering dynamic. And I think at the end of that, the challenge for us was then having figured out that this was a powerful process, but it was very hard to process the content of what came out because it was an individual to individual kind of initiative. We then had to say, okay, this is powerful, but there isn't any simple way for it to move to action. So how can we take what we've learned here and then move it into a next stage where people could really act on what they see and potentially act on it together in a way that would really shift the social capital and the social equation and build some communities together that have been separated.